I remember long before we had even heard of chemtrails instead of contrails, condensation trails, reading in declassified government documents in 77 that there had been over 3,000 declassified instances of aerial spraying of chemical, biological, and radiological materials, and then a whole other section of particulates that didn't fit into those four, being sprayed on the American people. And I like to go back to really famous cases, the few that have been actually heard of. Aircraft and Navy ships sprayed biological agents that did cause deaths. That's mainstream news. Details remain classified. That's what was declassified in 77 in the ship channel, the Golden Gate Bridge area of San Francisco in 1949. In 1968, time-released bioagents were released on the New York subway at 9 a.m. in the morning in 1968. Deaths resulted. Army doctors were at nearby hospitals, quote, in residency in the months before so that they could chronicle for themselves what the effects were. They have never told us what the biological agent was, only that it was a bacterium. Okay, there's two famous examples. I've interviewed a bunch of sailors and Air Force officers, and I've interviewed British soldiers and whistleblowers, and it's been in the BBC and AP, and it's been everywhere, that from the 1940s until 1985, Project Shad, from Hawaii to Germany, would have troops stand out in the field, say in Wales, and jets would fly over at 500 feet and spray a chemical weapon on them, and troops would die on the spot, and troops would die a week later, and troops would die 5 years later, and some are still alive. Or they'd tell a young officer, you get an extra 3-day leave if you sign in for a flu test. We're going to spray you with flu and see, it's for the country. Then the guy signs it, and they walk him in the chamber, hit him with VX nerve gas. He dies. They dissect the body. Folks, there are thousands of these, literally. Listen, I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds myself, okay? And then I've looked at lists of thousands. I cannot cover it all. I would be here talking for eternity. 2 years ago, let's use a newer example. It's in the Daily Oklahoman. It's in the Oklahoma papers that 5,000 pounds of Subtilis globigi, a bacteria that can cause spontaneous abortions in all mammalian species and is listed by the federal government and the Army as dangerous, was sprayed on every town and city over a 1-year period. 5,000 pounds. You'd read in the Daily Oklahoman, 5,000 pounds of Subtilis globigi will be sprayed in hundreds of different operations by small fixed-wing aircraft over the next year by the Department of Homeland Security in a test of the wind patterns of a biological release. It is completely safe. Then you go read what Subtilis globigi is. It causes upper respiratory problems, abortions, blood infections, everything. Just go look it up. That's one more case of thousands. White Rock, New Mexico spraying. On and on and on and on. Black men. It first came out over 45 years that they just let them die of syphilis and spread it. No. Now it's come out they gave it to them. They've caught the UN in over 100 countries with over 10 different manufacturers putting a pathogen, hormone, attached to the tetanus pathogen to sterilize women. On and on and on. Bayer, for over 10 years, knowingly knew their factor rate, every dose had AIDS in it and hepatitis C, and that everyone was going to get it who took it. And their own documents are now public, MSNBC. It's all public that they knowingly said, so what, let them die. So I don't want to hear that the government wouldn't spray us with something because I cannot even chronicle how many instances there are. Now, let me add this. I'm going to Clifford Carnicom, who I am just so proud of. He made a documentary. He put it out for free. They sell it for, he didn't even sell it for $2 a piece for shipping. They stream it for free. We got a link to it on Infowars.com. That's when you care, folks. I think you ought to charge a little more so you can have more funds to fund his operation, but he's done some of the best research out there. But C'est La Vie, he just gives it out for free. Free stream of it, and then you can also get it for the cost of shipping. So, but before I go any further, there are nuts everywhere who point at every condensation trail and discredit all of us and say, that's a chemical trail, that's a chemical... No. If they're spraying at 30,000 feet, all the evidence shows they're either hitting somebody 5,000, 10,000 miles away where the jet stream comes down to ground, or they are engaging in atmospheric manipulations, which we have documents on, weather control. There's a bunch of different stuff going on. People all try to say it's this or it's that. No, as usual, it's a cocktail of different operations. But we had reports before people ever heard of contrails in 1998, 97, and I have people I know personally who saw it, and then other witnesses separate that didn't know it saw it the same day. Black helicopter flies over. Mike Hansen and Steve Lane saw it while they're building a house out in Belton. Flies over to school, sprays it. Everybody gets sick, vomiting, diarrhea. It was on national TV. Remember that? We have all seen this type of stuff go on. This has been reported on. There's a bunch of declassified instances of it. So if they're going to spray your town, it's going to be from 2,000 feet or lower, normally 1,500 feet. Helicopter and fixed wing. And there is chemtrail spraying. I remember in 97, 98 it started. Before anybody even had talked about it, I said, why do trails, and I never knew the answer, that used to disappear in a few seconds to a minute, why are they there 4 hours later? Why do they all form a haze? Now NASA admits the Earth is 20% darker than it was 30 years ago. Now it's in mainstream government textbooks that they are spraying. Joining us is Clifford Carnicom. Sir, thank you for holding during that introduction. We are so honored to have you. Let me just give folks your bio. Clifford Carnicom, who has been actively involved in bringing attention to the chemtrail phenomenon, has been a self-employed professional computer consultant for the past 3 years and now resides in Santa Fe, New Mexico with his wife, Carol. He is previously a research scientist and federal employee for 15 years with 3 different agencies, including the United States Department of Defense, the Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Forest Service. His technical background is extensive in the fields of science. I guess that's geodietic, if I'm pronouncing that right, science, advanced mathematics, computer science, and the physical sciences. And that's the bio from Coast to Coast AM. Clifford Carnicom, again, thanks for joining us.
Alex, thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. I truly appreciate it. And I also thank you for establishing that precedent, as you did in that opening segment, which is very, very true. And, you know, you referred to 1977, and I have a document that was given to me shortly after I started this research that is very clear documentation of the long history and litany of open-air testing. This particular document concerns congressional hearings that were held in 1977 that basically raised a question. It's an acknowledgement that the U.S. population has been openly tested and or experimented or operated upon. I think
and U.S. Code Title 50, Chapter 30, U.S. Code Chapter 50, I've got to say this code real fast to be able to get it out right. That's how my memory works. U.S. Code Title 50, Chapter 32, subsection 1520A, paragraph B says they're allowed to use lethal chemical, biological, or radiological agents on the American people for research. Sorry.
And, you know, this is 30 years later, but the opening line of these hearings is just amazing to me because it's basically unfortunate, but it appears as though after 30 years there's been really no progress made. I'd like to read this one sentence if I can. In the opening line to these hearings, it says, recent revelations of similar open-air testing in civilian areas have alarmed many people. Their concern extends beyond the safety or hazards presented by the test organisms. However, it goes to the heart of what a free society is all about. Should a democratic people cede to its government the full responsibility of determining when secret tests on unwitting subjects are necessary to protect the nation's security? That was Kennedy, back when Kennedy actually did some work in 1977. And I really give him credit because he raised the fundamental issue, which is really the very same issue now. And that is, to what limit is there, what threshold is there to the claim or guise of national security as a domain that is untouchable, no matter what the circumstances are. And this is the world that we're in now. National security is used as a defense, a hidden defense, as to any and all of these operations that the public has an obvious right to know, but are put under the cloak of supposedly protecting us. And Kennedy nailed it 30 years ago in that statement.
Well, it's a blank check for total tyranny. Oh, we're having no-bid contracts. National security. Oh, we're secretly arresting you. National security. We're going to spray bioweapons on you. National security. I mean, it's a perfect pretext for dictatorship.
It is, and I thank you for establishing precedent because that's a good ground plane to start on, is for people to realize, you know, this is not something that needs to be imagined or constructed. This is very real, has a long history. What is different about this operation that I became involved in researching at the beginning of 1999
is that it's so huge.
Is the scale and magnitude of the operation, and also the arrogance, the scale and the arrogance of the operation. And that is, we are now in a state of affairs where we have open-air testing on a global scale, direct lying about it from top officials. United States Air Force lied early in the game, direct lie to the American public, calling this a hoax without any real documentation of any kind to support their claim. And the scale and arrogance and magnitude of the effect is what's different. And that is important. It's not the same as conducting some localized test for some defensive project. This is open-air operations. It's not a test. This thing is in place. Our atmosphere has been changed. This world has been changed. It's not a matter of some little test pilot. You are breathing an altered atmosphere now. We all are.
I don't even know where to start, Clifford Carnicom. Let's go through how you woke up and the different projects that are rolled in. You mentioned the main focus of it, and I've done some of the similar research and looked at your research. It does appear to be mainly an atmosphere alteration, but then there's some other operations going on, too.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Clifford Carnicom is our guest, talking about chemtrails. Is only one part of the chemical, biological testing going on against us. I would say that it's kind of a dual axis. We've got everything happening with the in the air, in the water. They poison the water, they poison the air. They've been caught red-handed doing it. They institutionalize what they're doing right in front of our faces many times. It's the arrogance, the sodium fluoride, the stannous fluoride, and the rest of it, documented to be deadly poison. But then you have the vaccines. They're also poisoning you through those. See, if they're admitted to have done all this horrible stuff in the past, how do you then now trust them to take your vaccines? If one of the biggest pharmacological companies in the world, Bayer, would knowingly put AIDS virus in your drugs, knowingly, and hepatitis C, knowing it was in there, and still selling it, then what would the government and these other groups do? So I don't want to hear it's too dastardly too big. Clifford Carnicom, how did you wake up to this, and then get into the atmosphere manipulation, and then shift into the biological effects of that, but then the biological effects of the other spraying we know is going on?
My work started at the very beginning of 1999, Alex, in February, and we go outside quite a bit. My wife and I go camping quite a bit, and I have a background that's outdoors quite a bit. And I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a high desert region, certainly one of the classic regions for high desert, blue skies, just beautiful vistas. Many artists live here because of that. And so it's actually an ideal laboratory if a person wants to be in a certain place to examine this issue. And February 14th, it was Valentine's Day, was the day that I actually started to work. And it had been preceded by several weeks of noticing a pattern that we would head out on our trips for the morning of the weekend. It would look absolutely beautiful when we would wake up. Very, very typical weather conditions for the high desert Southwest. And then we'd have breakfast, and about an hour and a half later, we'd go out, and the weather had completely changed. And that was acting really at a subconscious level for 2 to 3 weeks. And then on that February 14th, I was out the door. At the time, it was still perfectly blue, and this aircraft went directly overhead. And what was different this time is I just watched. I'm sure it was being triggered at a subconscious level, but this time I just stood and I just watched, and I watched the transition take place for the first time. And the amazing thing is that a major transition can actually take place at about a half hour of time if the operation is large enough. So you can completely transform the atmosphere in a regional area in a fairly short period of time.
You can watch